Stu. How you do? So last time I was in your class, I paid, during reading time, I paid a lot of attention to what was happening with the individualized activities and the differentiated instruction, and I had some conversations with students about what they were learning, and it was a great lesson. And so this time, because last time I didn't pay much attention to what you were doing at your back table, and I sort of had some questions about what was happening at the back table. And so this time when I came in during reading, I wanted to really see what you were doing with individual kids back there at the table. So the first thing that happened when I came in, you guys broke right out of meeting, and I thought you did a nice job. You gave them a specific expectation. They had to check their workboard. They noticed that the next thing in the workboard was what everybody had to do. You mentioned you were changing the workboard activities today, aside from that first one, and they seem pretty excited about that. It seemed like they like to have changes in their schedule with the workboard. And then what transpired from there is you gave them 1 minute, then you gave them a 30-second reminder, and for the most part, they were really good. And then and they got right to their desks, they took out their work, they checked the workboard changes, they knew what was expected of them, and they were getting to work, which was fantastic. And then during that time, you also went to individual students quietly with a book and said, I think, read the first 2 chapters or such and such. And so I'm going to get to that and ask you a little bit about that. And then I wanted to really pay attention to what was on the back table here when you started out with one student.
Sure.
So, and I remember you told me you had notes on every kid, you knew what they were working on, what their strengths were, what their weaknesses were, so I wanted to see how you took notes when you were working with kids as well.
Okay.
So first I want to start with, why did you go to those individual kids with a specific activity?
Okay. The way the reading groups are set up is all the kids have the work from the workboard that they need to do, and then each day I meet with 2 reading groups. So I go to those reading groups at the beginning of the class and say, okay, this is what I'd like you to focus on reading independently, and then you'll have a chance to come up to the table to read with me.
Okay.
So that's what it was. It was giving them their assignment for the day. Normally, it's going right over to the table. They're all sitting at their table. There was a little bit of chasing kids around because there was a little bit more action today. So it looked like chasing kids around, and it looked probably a little more individualized than it really was. But I picked 2 reading groups each day that I focus on.
So you just identified those kids in that reading group and gave them what they needed to be reading.
Yeah.
And so the student at the back table, was she part of that reading group, or was she part of a different reading group?
Yeah,
okay.
She was part of the yellow group, which was the first group I focused on today.
And so I noticed you were reading with her, sort of word by word, sentence by sentence, and then stopping her at certain points where she struggled with the word. So in this situation, she was struggling with the word supposed. Tell me, what you know about that student, and you gave her some guidance and advice and some prompts to get her to understand that. So if you could talk to me a little bit about that. Right.
Well, she's one of my stronger readers, actually. So there's not a lot of interventions that I do with her. It's usually a couple of words here and there that I can help her with. But basically, I keep track of the types of mistakes that she's making, and giving the kids strategies that they can use and apply in different situations. So, some of the longer words, one of the biggest things I do is go to syllabication strategies and have them break the words up. That word was supposed, and the syllabication didn't really help with that because you have the silent ED ending on it. So it was focusing on, okay, look at that ending, the ED, what do you know about that ending? And think of other words that have that ending, and really focusing on that strategy, looking at endings and applying what you know about them to help you with the word.
Right, and so it seemed like she got through it, but then I noticed you were writing, you had her name and then you wrote the word supposed. Right. So how does that guide you for your instruction with the notes you're taking for that student?
Well, with most of the major errors, I mark them down, and I mark down what the student said and then what the actual word was. So then at the end of the day, I go back and I look, and I can see patterns as far as the types of mistakes the kids are making. It may be initial consonant blends, or it may be certain endings that are tripping up the kids. So I can look for patterns that I see with the kids, and I know how to focus the instruction based on that.
And then I really wanted to stay long enough to see the transition from one student to the next student. And what I like about this process, and what we're doing about this process, is I learned exactly what the real day looks like for a teacher. Boom, fluoride comes in.
Right.
All of a sudden, your work stops with that student and other students, you know, it's orange today and yes or no, or, and fluoride is all of a sudden the topic of conversation, it breaks up everything.
Right.
So how could maybe, I guess my question to you is, how can the school do a better job, or we can do a better job in communicating a strategy with the nurse so fluoride doesn't stop instruction? And I know it's not a long pause, because then I even went into another classroom next door just to sort of see how things were going in that classroom, but at the same time to pay attention to how long fluoride takes.
Right.
And it was actually a lot shorter than I thought.
Yeah, my guess is about 5 minutes. Is that what you found?
Yeah, I think it was even a little less than that.
Okay.
But I was just sort of wondering in my mind, is there a strategy that we could use with the nurse and talk to the nurse about it so it doesn't break up any instruction, or there's no sort of this drop everything and get excited about the color of
I will
fluoride.
say that the instructional momentum is just blown apart, and it's tough, and you know, it takes a couple minutes to give the kids that 60 seconds again to refocus and get back to work. So it is something that's challenging and difficult, and I don't know. I mean, I've tried to think about this because it's something, you know, that as a teacher it's frustrating. But the reality is that, you know, she's got a set amount of time to go to each room, and I mean, unless she was in our room at 9:30, boom, you know, it's really difficult to do.
What if, this was my thought at the end of it, what if she had, because of course she's carrying 2 trays full of fluoride, so she has to come in the room and put them down somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering what if she borrowed the cafeteria dolly for the cafeteria trays, wheeled it to the outside of the door, just peeked her head in and said, you know, fluoride time. Or just seeing her would give you the prompt that, okay, it's fluoride time. And so there you would go, what's this, a gray cloud?
Yep.
So you'd be like, gray cloud group, or whatever you call your group of students, you need to go out in the hall with the nurse. And so they stop, they go out, they come back, yellow cloud, red cloud, green cloud, so forth and so on. So they go, they come back, they go, they come back. And then the student you're working with, you can just send them with a group.
So an amazing idea.
So that was my thought, and I think maybe I can communicate that with Donna, and possibly that'll work well for everybody. So maybe we can talk to our other 2 teachers in our eval pilot.
Very good.
But I didn't get to the point, I thought, because of the whole fluoride thing, where I could see the transition between students and ask a little more questions, you know, to sort of provide a recommendation. So I feel the thing that I was sort of wondering about was the fluoride, and I hope that's helpful.
I think you hit on pretty much the biggest thing about, you know, that day. The transition between kids, actually, that's one thing that's very smooth, because the kids are all working quietly, and, you know, one student was over there, she'll go back and I'll just call out the name, and the student comes over with the book, and so that goes pretty smooth.
That's good.
But yeah, you hit the nail right on the head with the fluoride problem.
Great. Well,
Thanks.
good times, Stu.
Okay.